morning, everyone. This is Jeff Santos and the Jeff Santos Show. We're here every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern and 7 o'clock Pacific time. We have a great program today. We're going to be speaking about all the progressive issues that you come to Free Speech TV for. Of course, single-payer health care, the concerns over the environment, latest news on the economy where GM is going to lay off 10,000 folks. All that, and we'll talk to two guests about all these issues. First, we'll talk with Russell Freedman, the Massachusetts State Coordinator, Progressive Democrats for America. And of course, we'll get into all of that. And then we'll go more into the issue of corporate accountability with Media Director Jesse Bragg of the organization Corporate Accountability. Of course, we always want your emails, and you can respond to me, jeff@revolutionboston.com. You can check us out on Facebook and Twitter at Jeff Santos Show. And again, you can catch the replay of Free Speech TV on at 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock Pacific time. We'll be right back with Mr. Russell Freedman after this timeout.
Bye-bye.
Get home safe.
Hi. Hoping for a crisp breeze to help keep you alert. Oh, he took a sip of water too. That'll probably help. You were probably going to turn down the radio too, so you could focus, right?
Probably okay isn't okay.
Right.
If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
I think the water line is what really drove it home. I blew on him.
I surrender.
All right, pal.
Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's up?
Do we have a gun?
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
Can I play with it?
No, absolutely not. It's not a toy. You know that. Anyway, I need it to protect you, your sister, and Mom.
But what about the 8 kids who get shot every day by mistake?
Where'd you hear that?
Where do you keep it?
It's hidden.
I bet it's on the top shelf of the closet, under your sweatshirts. Is it loaded? Remember when I found my Christmas gift? You always told me to be curious.
No, that's not what I meant.
And when it's just me and Mom, I could use the gun to protect her.
No, Justin, I promise. I'm always here for you.
But Dad, you're not always here.
Sunshine through today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low near 70.
Welcome back. You're tuned in to FSTV, the Jeff Santos Show. We're here every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. Our first segment today tackles the Democratic Party. What are we going to go? Where's the progressive movement? Well, there's nobody better to talk about that than right here in Massachusetts. Our next guest is the state coordinator for Progressive Democrats of America. He is the Massachusetts State Coordinator for Progressive Democrats of America. He's Russell Freedman, and he joins us via Skype from Western Massachusetts today. Russell, great to have you on the program. How are you?
I'm doing fine, Jeff. Thanks for giving me a call. I appreciate it.
Well, it's great to have you on. It's great to be part of the organization. Met a lot of your colleagues at a event in Boston a couple of weeks ago. It's a great organization, and one that is going to be very important, I think, for the Democratic Party to move in a progressive direction, in my opinion, a winning direction going forward. Well, the Democrats did take control of the House, maybe up to 40 seats before it's over. Where do you think the Democrats should go from your progressive perspective? And should it be focused on the House? Or will you start the campaign probably in January for 2020? And should the issues and the discussion be coming from the presidential candidates? Your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's really important for the Democrats to set up a real set of policy initiatives. The progressives that won on things like single payer and $15 an hour and college education, environmental issues. And I think it's really important for the Democratic Party as a whole, and especially in the House, to set up a platform that shows what we as Democrats want to do, at least as progressive Democrats. You know, there is a real issue between progressive Democrats and more corporate Democrats, and I think that that's a lot of what the discussion is going to be in the House in the next 6 months to a year.
Do you sense that what happened with the 40 seats and a number of governor's seats as well, and some state houses, that there is this contention of whether there was a blue wave or it wasn't a blue wave or it was half a wave or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that the folks that ran away from the Democratic Party, Claire McCaskill, who said that she's not a wingnut liberal, or Mr. Donnelly in Indiana, who also got defeated at the polls, who used an axe to Democratic and liberal policies, or even in Bredesen in the state of Tennessee, who said that I don't like the Democratic brand, or Bill Nelson, who lost in a close race, who said that the only thing he had to do to get the African American vote out was to just let the people come out who are felons and let that vote come out. It just seems that a lot of the folks who lost just ran away from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and people ran away from them. Your view?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. If you remember back in the day, there used to be a Blue Dog coalition, and they're pretty much all gone. I think that what this election proved is if you're Republican light or Republican, that conservatives will go with real Republicans. The ones that won, like you say,
right,
were the ones who talked about progressive issues and talked about issues rather than labels. A lot of people in this country haven't responded from the 2008, downturn. A lot of people who now have jobs at much lower standards of living, and that's a real issue for people. And the kinds of things that Democrats were talking about was dealing with people's real life experience. And that's what I think voters responded to. And that's what I'm hoping that Democrats look to when they're setting an agenda in Congress.
Well, there's no doubt historically Democrats win on economic issues.
Sure.
They get into the fights when they get into some social concerns, and this is a proof in the pudding. There's some breaking news today upon what happened with some 10,000 jobs that GM has announced that there could be lost. There seems to be sort of a lack of concern from some folks on Wall Street. At least that's the preliminary discussion. Where do you think that the economic situation will be for Democrats to propose, more investment, particularly in those Midwestern states where they now control the governorship, in Wisconsin and Michigan, of course, Detroit, where GM is located, Ohio, even though they lost that state, Pennsylvania, they won and won re-election and picked up a couple of congressional seats on top of it. What is your thought there? Is that an issue? Is that something the Democrats should really go on the offense about?
Well, a lot of these progressive candidates are talking about the green economy. That's where the jobs are. And for the life of me, I don't understand why the Democrats are not suggesting building massive solar factories in places like West Virginia and in the Midwest. I think part of what's happened to the auto industry is the steel tariffs, but there is a massive possibility for new jobs in dealing with the environment. And this, I think, is a place to go. We saw these students at Nancy Pelosi's office just, 2 weeks ago, talking about the environment. We're seeing these fires and storms and all the rest. And we really have to talk about reorienting our economy. And one of the ways to do that is creating the kind of green jobs which solve both problems, dealing with the environment and what's happening to the environment, but also bringing good jobs to people who need them. So, solar collectors. I don't understand why every house in the south of the U.S. doesn't have a solar collector on top of it.
Well, I think there's one reason. His name is Donald Trump, but he doesn't even believe.
Well, it didn't start with Donald Trump.
That's true.
The problem. It didn't start with Donald Trump. That's where the economy can go, and it solves both problems, I think.
We're talking with Russell Freedman, again, Massachusetts State Coordinator for Progressive Democrats of America, here on the Jeff Santos Show. I want to get to the issue, which of course was dominating the races for the House, and for that matter, for governor as well, and that is health care. Now there is this debate between whether to go status quo, the Obamacare Affordable Care Act, and Medicaid expansion, which of course helps a lot of people, or whether to take the next step of Medicare for all, or even what Representative Tim Ryan, who's opposition to Nancy Pelosi, or even Brian Higgins of New York recently stated, which is something I would like to see. That is, start the process in the House with expanding the eligibility age from 65 to 55. That to me would be a way to move on this issue because, we just connected with the GM scenario. Well, if I'm a GM person and I can pay less per employee, I can go across the border to Windsor, Canada,
Sure.
and have single-payer health care and not have to pay a dime. Or I can do it here in the United States and obviously have to pay the health care situation. Your thoughts there? Because to me, this is all connected, and it's there for Democrats to take advantage of.
Well, PDA, from its inception in 2004, has been running a campaign we call Healthcare Not Warfare. This country spends upwards to $1 trillion a year on war and as my dad used to say, past, present, and future wars. Our idea is to support H.R. 676, which is enhancing Medicare for all, single payer. Maybe the way to get there is to drop the eligibility from 65 to 55, but our view is to drop it to zero.
Oh, I agree.
Every other advanced industrial country is able to do it. We seem to have plenty of money for war. Nobody seems to question deficit spending when it comes to that. Yet, we still have near 50,000 people a year without health care, without health insurance in this country. And it's that much more expensive. Our life expectancies are not where they should be in comparison to other industrial countries. So I think, Elizabeth Warren here in Massachusetts said that single payer should be the center of the presidential campaign. We support single payer, and we think that the Democrats should push that, even though we know it won't go through the Senate. It wouldn't be signed by Donald Trump, but it would be a major issue if it passes the House, and it would be the center of a campaign for the presidency. Democrats could run on, you elect us and we will give everyone health care in this entire country. That, I think, is the winning proposition. Under the Affordable Care Act, there's still a lot of people going bankrupt. I was just reading this morning about a fellow with leukemia who turned down getting his medicine, basically signing his own death warrant because he didn't want to bankrupt the rest of his family. That shouldn't be happening in this country or any country. And the way to deal with that is everybody, like in Canada, you go in with your health care card and you get the care you need.
It's pretty simple. And there's nobody from Vancouver or Montreal, lining up at the American border to get in to have our healthcare system. I can tell you that.
That's sure.
We're talking with Russell Freedman here on the Jeff Santos Show against Massachusetts State Coordinator of Progressive Democrats of America. To the point of healthcare, and one other issue that I think is resonating, particularly with millennials, is what Bernie Sanders, and we can get into the presidential discussion in a second on who's going to be running in 2020. But one of his tenets is the fact that he wants to have 4 years of free public university. And I think if you want to get young people out to vote and they realize that their future depends upon a 4-year college degree, that goes without saying, the unemployment numbers for high school graduates are close to 20%. For college graduates, it's at 4 or 5%. So it is obviously, and obviously graduate school from there. Do you think this is something that also the Democratic candidates, along with single-payer Medicare for all, should be a base of where the Democrats should be discussing this issue?
I think absolutely. Somewhere along the line, back in the 1940s, it was determined that high school education was all one needed. As we said before, the economy has changed. Why should there be an arbitrary line drawn at 3 years of high school when, public education, public colleges can and should provide the kind of training that we need for our economy? As I say, if you want to go to Harvard and pay $75,000 a year, that's a different issue. But here we have great university system. We had great community colleges. And why should people have to go into massive debt to be able to be, employable in this kind of an economy? As I say, the rules were set up years ago, but the economy has changed, and so it's time to change the rules.
A couple of questions want to have before we roll here. The future stars of the party. We saw her in New York, Miss Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Should progressive Democrats and Democrats as a whole be trying to include someone like her, if not in this direct new leadership, but one for 2020, that she should be part of the leadership because of not only her age, but her real feistiness for some of these issues that we just talked about: healthcare, education, et cetera, minimum wage, $15 an hour. Is this something, because she's, I think, a quality candidate, quality person, and you don't get them every day, who can speak truth to power in her particular fashion. Your thoughts there?
Well, there are a whole group, 40 new members of Congress.
Right.
And they're going to have to be integrated into the power structure of the Democratic Party. And as you say, we need to continue to expand this. I mean, you can't really say that the Democratic Party is right now a progressive party, although there are a lot of progressive elements. But the Congressional Progressive Caucus now has 90 members. So I think it's important that we integrate the CPC people with the established leadership. People like Alexa Cortez and others should be given a role so that their politics can impact what the party stands for. And I'm assuming that the old line establishment is smart enough to realize who won the elections, what issues were raised, and will bring those people into the structure. They're going to have to. Either they're going to do it voluntarily, or they're going to have people run against some of these people, and they'll do it involuntarily. I think they're smart enough to realize that there's a better way to do it than to try to butt heads with where the energy in the party is right now.
Final couple of questions here for Russell Freedman here on the Jeff Santos Show. Russell, again, is the Massachusetts State Coordinator of Progressive Democrats for America. Let me ask you, I know that you, and I include myself in this, were big Bernie Sanders supporters in 2016 and before that. I've had him on my radio show on the RevolutionRadioNetwork.com going back to 2009. Do you think that he is the favorite of progressive Democrats across the country? And are you looking to support him and hope that he runs in 2020? And who else is out there that should have some attention paid to by progressives across the U.S.?
Well, I think it will depend a lot on the program that people are talking about. I just saw in Common Dreams this morning an interview with Bernie in which he listed about a dozen different plans that he has or ideas about minimum wage, Medicare, climate change, criminal justice. I think that these issues are important that they come out. I think it's important that he be part of the discussion. It's a 2-year process, or almost. I think that he will be an important factor. He's very popular. I don't have any inside information, but personally I feel that unless there's some kind of a health issue for him, that he will be running. We'll see. Back in 4 years ago, PDA ran a program called Run Bernie, Run as a Democrat, in which he came to our 10th anniversary party and talked about running for president. We spent about a year taking him around to different events around the country, because he said he didn't want to run a vanity campaign. He wanted to run a campaign if there was a movement that would support his ideas. And he tells a story about our event in California, where he was coming up to the event site, and there was a line of people out the door. And he thought it was a Rolling Stones contest, and concert, and he rolled down his window, and he said to one of the kids in line, "What's going on? Why are you all here?" And they said, "Bernie Sanders is coming." And I think that convinced him that what he was talking about had a resonance around the country. And it was a year later that he announced that he was running. I think the ideas that he's talked about for years and years and years have sort of caught up with the American public, and that what he's talking about will resonate continually. There may be others, Sherrod Brown, Elizabeth Warren, there's, a number of people, Cory Booker, etc., who are talking about it, and we'll just have to see how it sort of filters down. At this point, PDA is deciding what we're going to do. We do go through a process before we endorse, and depending on who announces whatever, we'll go through that process again.
Finally, do you sense that the recent acknowledgement by the United States government that Mr. of course Trump heads on the environmental focus, is this something that you think will sort of change how we look at, as you talked about, green jobs? I'm a big advocate of rail as an example, electric vehicles. How much will this issue, because of what we have seen with the fires and the storms and so forth, will play a role in the 2020 campaign?
I think it's going to play a major role because it's not going to go away. We keep hearing things like the environment doesn't negotiate. The storms are going to happen. I'm amazed that people take anything seriously that comes out of the president's mouth. I mean, a good 75 to 80% of it is just factually untrue. And, I saw a picture today of the Titanic and, with its nose in the water and its tail up in the air. And someone said, and the caption was, well, if we're sinking, how come we're so high up? I mean, it was a wonderful image. The environment is telling us, and the scientists are telling us, and even if the Republican Party doesn't want to hear it, I think the rest of the country knows. I mean, how many people died out in those fires in California? How many people died in the hurricanes? This is what the scientists told us was going to happen, and it is. And I think that the American people are smarter than a lot of their politicians, and will force the conversation because they're going to have to deal with it. We're all going to have to deal with it.
It's so great to have you on. Russell Freedman, Massachusetts State Coordinator of Progressive Democrats for America. Is there a website people want to go to find out more about your group?
Yeah, pdamerica.org. That's pdamerica.org. There's a number of issues that you can look at. There's ways to join. We're not a membership organization in the sense we don't have dues. We survive with a program we call Change Makes Change. People give us up as little as $5 a month, and that keeps our national staff going and pays for the website as well. And the other thing we can do, I can just give us a plug, is that we have a program through our Live group, People Demanding Action, that delivers a letter to our congressman every month. We do this around the country, talking about specific issues that we want to, we want our congressmen to think about and engage with. And if there's one thing I can say we saw at this past election, is engagement matters. Engagement in getting people elected, and then once they're getting elected, people have to stay engaged to make sure that elected officials do the right thing. So engage with your elected officials, local, state, national.
Russell Freedman, thank you for spending time with us today. Appreciate it very much.
My pleasure. See you soon.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this timeout.
They call me Prince like I'm royalty or something. But the places I've lived ain't no palaces. So I don't need grilled salmon or a new scratching post. Just give me a cardboard box and a can of tuna and we're good. You can even change my name. I'm cool being the kitty formerly known as Prince.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up. till they buckle up.
Patriotism. It inspires passionate debate. It's worn like a badge of honor with good reason, because it means love and devotion for one's country. But what really makes up this country of ours? It's the people. To love America is to love all Americans. This year, patriotism shouldn't just be about pride of country. It should be about love. Love beyond age, sexuality, disability, race, religion, and other labels. Because love has no labels.
Bye-bye.
Get home safe. Hi. Hoping for a crisp breeze to help keep you alert. Oh, he took a sip of water too. That'll probably help. You were probably gonna turn down the radio too, so you could focus, right?
Probably okay isn't okay.
Right.
If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend.
I think the water line is what really drove it home. I blew on him.
Welcome back. You're tuned in to Free Speech TV. This is the Jeff Santos Show. We're here every Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Pacific, and replayed at 1 o'clock Eastern and 10 o'clock Pacific. It's great and very important for our next discussion. Of course, it affects all of us in this planet. That is, of course, climate change. And what corporations are doing, what governments are doing is the role of corporate accountability. The media director for corporate accountability is our guest today. He joins us via Skype from the great state of Colorado, Denver, Colorado. It's great to have Jesse Bragg, media director for corporate accountability, with us. Jesse, good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for having me on the show, Jeff.
It's great to have you on the program. Well, talk to us a little bit, for people that don't know, about corporate accountability, what you do. I know going after corporations and understanding their responsibility. Give us a little background upon the campaigns that you do and so forth.
Sure, yeah. So corporate accountability was born out of the infant formula boycotts, specifically targeted at Nestle, of the late 70s. And really the concept here is there are a number of abuses being driven by massive industries around the world. And our role as an organization is to build movements to shift the cost-benefit ratio for those industries, so they have to change their practices. And we work at the international level to then lock those changes in policy. So our campaigns right now are focused on the tobacco industry, really no explanation needed there.
Right.
The fast food industry and big ag, the water privatization and water bottling industries, and then finally the fossil fuel industry.
When you think about where we are today, and of course the news last week of climate change, the Trump administration then, I think, answered back as we tape a few days before the broadcast. They're saying, well, this is the worst case scenario. Well, the worst case scenario has already occurred. We've seen the fires, we've seen the hurricanes, we've seen the storms, the floods. How do you continue to sort of take this initiative and the evidence that we have seen over the last few weeks, few months, few years, to sort of educate the public to understand that corporations, particularly here in the United States and other parts of the world too, have sort of made this worse, and that, you know, that we need to change that dynamic as well as the government one?
It's a great question, and I think the first thing I would point to is the midterm elections. We saw that round of elections was really, people by and large voted for corporate accountability, small c, small a issues. They voted in people who would talk about the power and the role of corporations driving abuses in our lives, and talked about the influence those industries have over policymakers in Congress and otherwise. So I think that we're seeing a shift, and potentially compelled by Donald Trump and, you know, his cronies and the sort of corporate takeover of the White House. We're seeing a shift in people across the country and really the world looking critically at the role these industries have in driving decision making at the national level and at the international level. You know, and I think the fossil fuel industry is probably the best example. You look at the last election, they spent $100 million to take down a set of really strong and highly supported initiatives on climate change. So people are still, I think, smarting from that and really now understand, because it's more out in the open than it ever has been before, the role corporations play in our world.
We're speaking with Jesse Bragg, and the media director of corporate accountability here on Free Speech TV on the Jeff Santos Show. Talk to me a little bit more about tobacco, because this is something, of course, that goes right to the heart of the majority leader in the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell. Kentucky is a huge tobacco state, of course. It also goes to those red states in the South. Talk to me a little bit about, how to educate people, of this connection to climate, and, whether or not younger generations, we've seen this all across the country, whether we're talking about, Cuban Americans that voted for Obama in Florida that always were considering to vote Republican. We've seen it this fall with a lot of folks who decided to come out, white Americans, to vote for Miss Abrams and Andrew Gillum. Do you sense that there is people in red state America, particularly young people, that are just sort of become woke, as the terminology has been used, to some of these issues?
I think so. I think what we're seeing more and more is that neither of these two parties really wholly represent the perspectives of most Americans, most people in this country, and we've all sort of had that feeling in the voting box where we're choosing the lesser of two evils, as it were. And I think now, especially the younger generation is saying, is there a better way? And is the ballot box the only way to compel change in my world? And this new level of activism we're seeing, especially in younger generations, is a really hopeful sign that people are ready to question the status quo in a more deep way than we ever have been before.
Do you sense, and I don't know how much polling evidence you have, that younger people are less concerned about, trying to outdo their big brother or big sister in terms of how much money they made, and that the greenback is the ultimate aim here? Have we shifted away from that to the point, again, that, we're looking again at the name of your company, your organization, corporate accountability, that, that there needs to be more than just the bottom line, and that maybe the youthful 20 and 30 somethings, have a more, optimistic view, if you might?
Yeah. I think one of the reasons for that, and I definitely agree, is that I count myself within that generation. We are a generation that a lot of us really came into adulthood during the Great Recession, and many of us are saddled with student loan debt. And so while millennials may catch a lot of flack, for being on our phones all day and other sensibilities we also have a very realistic point of view of what our world looks like and what the limitations are. And I think given that, we've by and large devoted ourselves to greater causes, or at least supporting greater causes. And I think are a lot more compassionate than maybe other generations are for people who are less privileged, who are born with less in different situations. And so I think that's part of what's feeding into this new movement of young people getting really involved in a way that, news pundits have been complaining about for a long, long time. Why aren't young people voting? Why aren't they getting involved? We're seeing that change. And I think the foundation of that is really that our generation has it a little bit harder, given the economic situation in this country, than maybe previous generations have. Certainly when it comes to our student loan debt, and a lot of people starting their careers in the depths of a recession, our priorities are a little bit different.
We've seen a number of issues, starting with the Women's March back in early 2017, just weeks after the inauguration of President Trump, but also, in fact, just days after, there's also been a movement from young people on two issues. First on guns, particularly after Parkland, and secondly on immigration, because there's not this divide that has unfortunately been created not only by Trump but by people for a long time against people of color, mainly in this case Latinos. And I'm wondering if you are seeing that people are understanding where the conditions that these countries people are coming from, Honduras, poverty, just the basics, El Salvador, and it's been going on for 20, 30, 40 years, and the American government has either looked the other way or in some cases made it worse. How much of that do you sense is sort of invigorated the American youth, if you might?
I think it's fed into it a lot. There's a big difference. I think there's less of an us versus them mentality in this generation. I think there's a lot more compassion for the circumstances that people are born into and are fighting every day to get out of. And I think that extends to the immigration debate in this country as well. Young people don't see a migrant and say, well, you might take my job. They see a migrant and say they need help. That's what this country is about. And so it's shifting the mentality here and closing that divide between people who are trying to come to this country for a better life and people who live here. Now we're saying, yeah, we want to share this with you, as opposed to some sort of mentality around they will take it away from us. And I think that's a very significant shift that will inevitably compel significant changes in our immigration policy down the line.
Do you sense that people want to, besides, again, the elected officials, that corporate, your organization can sort of lead the way in telling an industry leader, well, if you are going to have a plant, in Honduras, well, you're dealing with, people who are trying to right now escape that country because of poverty, because of political persecution, that there is a number of issues here. How will your organization sort of, work with, say, an American company or a European company that, will go into some of these countries? Of course, that creates more and more upheaval for the people who live in those countries.
One of the tenets of our mission and the work that we do is that corporations, industries need to be held to the same standard regardless of where they are. And so that's why we work at the international level. We know we can do everything in our power here in the US to pass really strong laws that protect people from corporate abuse. And that to a varying extent has happened depending on the industry. But that just will inevitably drive that industry to do whatever they're doing elsewhere. And so if you look at the tobacco industry, for example, by and large, many global north countries have put in place some very strong public health policy. But what that has meant is that the tobacco industry has sought other markets to expand its profits. And so we can't just look at ourselves, to this larger conversation we're happening. We can't just look at what's protecting me and my family. We also need to look at what we're doing to hold this industry accountable around the globe. Right. And that's why international bodies like the UN can be so powerful in reining in corporate abuse.
How do you sense the difference now and the role of your organization based here in the U.S., in terms of Trump's, sort of disdain for foreign policy, for diplomats, for diplomacy? We don't even have, ambassadors in places like Honduras and El Salvador. Is the UN more likely to work with you because they see such an absence from the United States' current government, from at least from the White House? Is that at all helping you, in a sense, to sort of at least have the ear of UN officials?
It's definitely helping in terms of the politics within, for example, the UN climate treaty negotiations. Governments, particularly from the global South, are watching day by day as the Trump administration, for example, walks back climate commitments, eviscerates domestic climate policy. And it's making them less likely to negotiate with the U.S. in good faith. The U.S. has now said it wants to exit the Paris Agreement in 2020, but in the meanwhile, they are doing everything they can to undercut the Paris Agreement. We've attributed it to, it's kind of like they're lighting the building on a fire on their way out the front door. Right. And so that's compelling a shift in how other countries see the U.S. and negotiate with it. And our hope is that what it will mean at COP24 coming up in just a week is that they will no longer let the U.S. slow things down. They'll seek opportunities to go around them or expose them. When the U.S. stands alone, it often sits down. And that's what the next step in this process to really get ambitious climate policy or anything done at the UN where the U.S. is standing in the way.
How much will you work with the new leadership in the Democratic House, of course, just winning up to 38, 40 seats? Will this be at least a place where you can testify before Congress to be able to get your message out? Have you reached out to the upcoming chairman and chair people, involved?
We're one area where we're very supportive. We work mostly internationally. So when we're focused on domestic policy, it's in service of our international objectives. So one area where we're very supportive of new leadership in Congress is around the Green New Deal. We know that we need to act quickly. The U.S. has the largest historical responsibility to the climate crisis and is arguably doing the least to address it. And so what comes next has to be ambitious. It has to sort of rewrite the rules of how we approach problems. It needs to be New Deal scale. And so we're very supportive of the movement within Congress to make that happen.
Finally, your goals for 2019 and into the next decade. How would you like to see, the next 2 years go for corporate accountability?
We want to see the momentum coming out of the elections in 2018 continue, and that means people demanding of their representatives corporate accountability policies. Obviously, we want to follow the footsteps of the great state of Massachusetts in calling for the overturning of Citizens United. And across the board, we want advances on ambitious, people-centered policy. So with climate change, that means we can no longer allow organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to be in those negotiations and undermining those talks. We can't let the food industry continue unchecked, especially as it relates to climate change. The tobacco industry needs to stop driving its abuses around the world and addicting a new generation to e-cigarettes and other new products. And water privatization is the next frontier. Corporations are trying to grab up people's water and sell it back to them at a higher cost. And we're going to be right there making sure they don't get away with it.
That's true. And just 30 seconds, that actually happened in Flint with the profit making. People were found guilty on that. Is this something that you worry about, particularly in areas where there's not enough information? We call it low information voters, however you want to do it. Is that something that you're concerned about in particular as we approach another presidential campaign?
Yes, the industry, water privatization industry in particular, depends on low information to get its deals struck. And so you saw something like that happen in Flint, in Pittsburgh, there was an attempt in Baltimore. And so that's something we continue to monitor. And our role is simply to let people know, get them the information they need to make the decision for their city and for their people. So we'll continue to do that through 2020.
If people want to reach you, what's the best way, Jesse?
You can go to corporateaccountability.org, and there's contact information on the website. And you can reach out, and we'd love to chat with anyone about how to get involved more deeply.
Fantastic. Jesse Bragg, Media Director, Corporate Accountability. You know the website. You can go there. Thank you so much, Jesse, for spending time with us today.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. It was great.
Thank you. We'll be right back after this PSA.
I surrender.
All right, pal.
Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
Can I play with it?
No, absolutely not. It's not a toy. You know that. Anyway, I need it to protect you, your sister, and Mom.
But what about the 8 kids who get shot every day by mistake?
Where'd you hear that?
Where do you keep it?
It's hidden.
I bet it's on the top shelf of the closet, under your sweatshirts. Is it loaded? Remember when I found my Christmas gift? You always told me to be curious.
No, that's not what I meant.
And when it's just me and Mom, I could use the gun to protect her.
No, Justin, I promise. I'm always here for you.
But Dad, you're not always here.
Sunshine through today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low of 70.
They'll test you. Try to break your will. But however loud the loudness gets, however many cheese puffs may fly, you're the driver, the one in control. Stand firm. Just wait. And move only when you hear the click that says they're buckled in for the drive. Never give up till they buckle up.
Hey guys, how are you today?
Good.
I'm here to talk about how with technology you can make amazing worlds. Come with me. My team and I bring the Halo world to life.
Is that you?
That is me. I wasn't a math genius and I knew nothing about coding. But you guys do. You guys have the power to change things.
I want your job.
I want you to have my job.
It is our Won't Back Down segment. And folks, I'm a little upset today because of the violence that continues to occur in this country and seems to be urged on by the President of the United States. You know, we thought that 1968, 50 years ago today, was maybe the most violent time in our country. The assassination of Robert Kennedy, the assassination of Martin Luther King, the riots in the street that followed the assassination of King, the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. But you compare all that video and you then look at today, and just in the past week, the tear gas at kids coming across the border. Over the last couple of years, tanks in the street to take on peaceful protesters in places like Ferguson, Missouri, and in Florida. Where are we going? Where is America moving? Are we moving to a more violent police state America? Have we not learned over the last 50 years? We seem to ignore what we have learned in the past. I remember as a young person working in the Gary Hart campaign, Gary Hart talking about communism isn't the problem in El Salvador. Poverty is the problem in El Salvador. It still is today, as it is in Honduras. And these are the people that are coming across the border, fighting poverty, fighting political persecution. I don't know what we have learned, but we need to learn the lesson quickly. On the issue of climate change, we've been warned for a long time about floods, about fires. Al Gore's inconvenient truth has been out for years now, but where is the action? The Democrats coming into Congress have a role to play. Those running for president have a role to play. Unfortunately, our president is clueless, and the Senate in the United States and some governorships are also clueless. We need to show that we are a shining city on the hill. We need to show that we can resolve issues without violence. We have done it in the past. And my God, if we can't figure a way to do this and do it right now, then all the issues that we just talked about on climate change, on the need of health care and the urgency to help people who are at least in the age group of 55 to 65, past that and then move to single-payer health care in the next couple of years for everyone to be covered. So no one dies because they can't afford insurance or the hospital bill. These are all things, folks, that we thought we had learned. But right now, we seem to be getting worse, not better. Hopefully, the millennial generation will save the day. And I say hopefully because there's still a lot of them that do not want to come out to vote, that do not want to get involved. Some of them, unfortunately, don't have the time, don't have the wherewithal, don't feel that it is their responsibility to do so. Well, hopefully more and more of their friends, and brothers and sisters, and neighbors, and just people who are maybe people they meet in school or at work will get them engaged. Because really, without young people, and if you look back at the 1960s, whether it's marching in the South with civil rights or opposition to the Vietnam War, it was led by young people. So I urge you today, whether you're 20 or 30 years old, or maybe you're closer to my age, middle age, getting older by the second, or if you're a senior citizen, to urge people to get involved, and particularly younger people to lead the way. Because we don't want to go back to 1968. We don't want to go back to more violence. We don't want to pit people black versus white, white versus brown. We could do better, folks. We ask you to get engaged. We ask you to get involved. And if we do just a little bit, and maybe we saw a little bit of it today or in recent days with the percentage, I think 30% of millennials moving forward, more women running for office. All of this, to me, is a critical piece of where we need to go. And I believe that the future can be bright, but it's going to take all of us to make the American dream a reality for every resident and every citizen of this country. We hopefully will be able to look back, whether we're doing it through a book or through Google or through a great film, at what happened in the 1960s and learn those lessons. Because my God, if we can't move this country in a direction that is more about conflict resolution than about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the violence that we see, because we can lead. The American government can lead. And maybe Donald Trump can continue to boost his ratings amongst his small 30% of this country. But I think that Democrats, whether they're running for president or those in the House, will have the ability to have hearings to talk about all these issues, can make it clear that we're not going back to the 1960s. We're not going back to a more violent time in our country. My name is Jeff Santos. I urge you to get involved. I urge you to care. I urge you to get engaged. This is the Jeff Santos Show, and I, for one, won't back down.
I surrender.
All right, pal.
Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Why do you ask that, kiddo?
Can I play with it?
No, absolutely not. It's not a toy. You know that. Anyway, I need it to protect you, your sister, and Mom.
But what about the 8 kids who get shot every day by mistake?
Where'd you hear that?
Where do you keep it?
It's hidden.
I bet it's on the top shelf of the closet, under your sweatshirts. Is it loaded? Remember when I found my Christmas gift? You always told me to be curious.
No, that's not what I meant.
And when it's just me and Mom, I could use the gun to protect her.
No, Justin, I promise. I'm always here for you.
But Dad, you're not always here.
Sunshine through today with seasonal temperatures. We should reach our normal high of about 82 degrees by this afternoon. Clear skies tonight with a low near 70.
Welcome back. It is the Jeff Santos Show. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of the road. for today's program. We'll be back next week, Sunday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific time. I want to thank our guests, the Massachusetts State Coordinator for Progressive Democrats of America, Russell Freedman, and the Media Director for Corporate Accountability, Jesse Bragg. It is the Jeff Santos Show. We thank you for viewing. I want to thank both Erica Jones and Adam Stones for producing, and I want to thank you for viewing. We'll be back next week. Until then, my name is Jeff Santos. It's my time to say, I gotta go.